Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Classic Gaming Brothers. I'm Zach.
And I'm Seth.
And we're the Classic Gaming Brothers.
That's right, we are the Classic Gaming Brothers.
That's right, we are. Have you been staying warm in this cold weather, Seth? I know we don't have heat in our studio, so...
No, but we collected blankets.
Yeah, but they're all wet.
No, just your blanket.
No, I felt all of them. They were all damp to the touch.
No, but my blanket was on me.
Oh, well, you know what? It might have just been my hands that were wet.
This is a weird intro.
This is a weird intro, but, you know, that's what we do. We do weird intros on the Classic Gaming Brothers podcast.
I feel like we've done some serious ones before.
I don't know. How serious are you talking? Like
reading fan mail?
Yeah, but we don't have any fan mail right now.
I mean, we can always make it up.
It's true. We got a message from Johnny in Syracuse.
Johnny in Syracuse. How are you today? Hey guys, how are you?
Johnny says, I really love your episodes, but do you mind not making jokes go on for so long? Wow, Johnny in Syracuse is
really
a
very topical. Very topical.
Yeah, very topical. Yeah. Anyway, Seth, what have you been recently playing?
Recently, I've been playing a game released in December of 2003. Developed by Kudosoft and published by Ubisoft. It's a game called Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time, where you play as a prince in Persia, and he's kind of your prince is kind of a jerk in the beginning.
Okay.
So you're playing this son of a king, thus you're a prince.
You're not just playing as Prince,
No.
the late singer.
No. You're playing as this son of a king who is invading a village, and you race your king's forces to be the first one to the treasure room, and in the treasure room you find a sand dagger, and you're like, ooh, this is a magical glowing dagger. After like murdering all the people to get there, you show it off to your dad, and then he found a giant hourglass, and he then gives this hourglass to a visiting sultan. I think you leave the place that you invaded and you go somewhere else, and you bring this giant hourglass with you, and this like creepy Jafar type guy who's been hanging out with you guys, who does nothing except cough, proceeds to, like, he was at the battle and he didn't do anything except cough, proceeds to be like, oh, you reunite the dagger with this hourglass. And your dad's like, well, it's my son's dagger, he can do whatever he wants with it. And you're like, all right, I'm gonna reunite the dagger with this giant glowing hourglass. And I mean giant, it's like 4 times the size of people, and it's glowing. And you take your glowing dagger and you shove it in, and guess what? Bad things happen, because that's what happens when you take a dagger and shove it into a magical glowing hourglass. The sands come out. In fact, perhaps you can say the sands of time come out of the hourglass, and they erode away people, except for you, because you have a magical dagger. And then everyone either runs away or they die. And then some zombie creatures come back, and then you have to fight the zombie creatures. But now you have a magical dagger that can drain the soul essence out of the zombies, and you can use it to do time tricks.
Nice.
And you have to go and you have to find like this lady, because she like screamed out for you to stop, and you now think that she's connected to like how do you turn this back from the whoopsie daisy that you did, and you play through the game. It's been fun. You unleash a deadly evil, and you get to try to make up for it. And you do it through wall running, jumping over bad guys, and stabbing people with your knife. I really wanted to play Prince of Persia 3D, which is why I ended up on Sands of Time, because I remember we had the demo of Prince of Persia 3D. It's a very difficult game to play.
Like, in terms of getting it to run?
Yeah, in terms of getting it to run and finding it. I would probably have to use PCEM to get it to run, because it's not on DOSBox or the Winbox. The original Prince of Persia is, but not 3D. So then I think it's like a 90... It might be a 95 game or something.
It came out in 99, according to
yeah,
Wikipedia.
So it's a Windows 95 game. So I would have to get like PCEM. GOG might have a copy that vaguely works. Regardless, it's a difficult game to play, and from what I read, not really that good. So
yeah, But I really loved that demo.
The demo was great. I still will try to play it one day, but instead they're like, just play the Sands Time Trilogy because that's the best version of Prince of Persia there's out there.
I remember the demo. If you got hit by a blade, your guy would just fall in half.
Yeah, well, the blade would take his head off.
Yeah. Oh, it's good.
It is a good demo. Maybe I'll try to find playing it again. I do also have an update for the podcast listeners.
Ooh.
On my list of games that I want to beat in 2025, I had Hercule Poirot and the Murder on the Orient Express, and I'm pleased to announce that I beat it.
Oh, I'm glad.
I'm glad as well. I beat it. There were some twists, and
which twist?
It was a twist, and there was a twist that was not immediately. It's not something I saw coming, which was good, and it's not directly related to the Murder on the Orient Express,
like the twist that's in the book.
Like the twist that's in the book. That twist is still there since it plays through the entirety of Murder on the Orient Express. It's set in 2023, but you're just on a train because Hercule Poirot doesn't drive. Though for a game that's set in 2023, I just want to talk about a moment that happened in the game. There is a valet.
Valet?
Not a valet, not like a car parker, like a person who helps you put on your shirt. A valet who is in there, and he is the guy who gets murdered, valet. And so he needs a new job. And him and this American guy at the end of the game are like, the American's like, I know somebody in America who is set in the 30s Britain and needs a valet. So I'm going to bring this guy to go work for him. And they said, we're going to get on the train and we're going to go to Heathrow and we're going to find some flights and fly back to America. I said, the game is set in 2023. Nobody does that. Nobody just goes to the airport to see what flights are available. All the flights are oversold. How are they going to get anywhere? They're going to go to Heathrow. They're just going to get laughed at. And is there even a ticket counter anymore?
That's funny.
But beyond that anachronistic piece, it's a pretty good game. I like it. I'm glad that I beat it. It's off my list. I've got 2 more on my list, Sinking City and Black Sad.
Well, Black Sad will be kind of relevant to today's episode, but before we get into today's episode...
What have you recently been playing?
Yeah, I've been playing Oratorio, largely thanks to Seth, because Seth got me a copy of it for the NES. It's a NES game developed by John Vanderhoof and published by our good friends over at Premium Edition Games. Oratorio is a rhythm shooter game for the NES that was released in 2024. It is a homebrew game released for classic console in a modern time. And it's pretty fun. It's a very neat cyberpunky kind of game. It combines a rail shooter with rhythm games. You have this music that will constantly change depending on, what you're shooting and how you're playing the game and how well you're doing. And it's really cool. It like I said, has the cyberpunk aesthetic. It kind of makes you feel like you're hacking a computer. Like when the game boots up, it's like Oratorio, and it like has not a DOS prompt, but like a loading prompt, and it's very techy looking. But yeah, it's a really fun game. I've been really enjoying it, and I definitely think people should check it out. You can actually grab a copy on itch.io from the developer, and that copy can run in, I assume, any NES emulator, but you can also pick up a copy from Premium Edition Games that is on a physical cartridge. And yeah, it's just this neat kind of puzzly rhythm game with kind of also rail shooter elements. And it's kind of cool to be playing a rail shooter on the NES. It's not a system that had a lot of rail shooters, that's for sure. So definitely check it out if you get the chance. That's Oratorio.
Nice. I'm glad that you got your special edition copy.
It is the special silver edition.
Silver edition.
Anyway, to get into today's episode, like I said, Seth, looking forward to playing some Black Sad is kind of relevant to today's episode because it's a bit of a sequel to our Tintin episode we just did, like 2 episodes ago. We touched on Tintin a bit, and when we did, we talked a bit about Asterix. Asterix being another comic series that our father got us into. As mentioned, if you didn't listen to our Tintin episode, our dad got us into essentially Euro comics. We had Asterix, we had Tintin comics. We didn't really have any others. Like, I don't remember us having like Redbeard, or there was another series that was pretty popular around the same time that featured like adventurers and stuff like that. We didn't have those. We did have Asterix, we did have Tintin, and yeah, we read those, and much to my sadness, no one else I knew in the world read Asterix or Tintin. It was just me and Seth. I did try very hard to get my friends into Asterix. I don't think they enjoyed me trying to get them into it, but I tried. But I did have a good number of the Asterix books. Seth had most of the Tintin books, and I had a good chunk of the ones that were published here in the United States for Asterix. I would say it was kind of formative to me. When I was in school, I did opt to take French over Spanish, largely because of Asterix. I grew up reading Asterix. It's a French comic, and when it came to choosing a language to learn in school, I picked the language I was familiar with, which was French, thanks to the comics. And we actually did have one of the Asterix games, one of the few that was released in the United States, being Asterix and the Great Rescue, which is a very good Genesis game with a really good soundtrack, and we'll talk a bit more about it later. But Seth, do you have any memories in particular of Asterix?
Well, I do have memories of us playing the Sega Genesis game Asterix and Obelix. I remember one of the Asterix kind of is like a little small man that kind of looks like Hermes from like Greek myth. He's got
the feathers on his
on his helmet, and he runs around and punches people. And then Obelix is a heavyset guy that hangs out with him, and they get into all sorts of chaos in the video game and also the comics. I remember we had a few of the comics. I remember reading those, but I think as you alluded, I was kind of always more into Tintin. I think we didn't get Asterix and Obelix stuff until later, and we didn't have any Tintin games. Most of my memories regarding Asterix and Obelix are just the video game the video game that we had.
Yeah, that's fair. Now, to get into the history of Asterix before we talk about some of the video games that were made for this character, the Asterix comic series began back in 1959 when writer René Goscinny and Albert Uderzo began publishing the first stories in the Franco-Belgian magazine Pilote. Goscinny was born in Paris in 1926. His parents were Jewish immigrants from Poland. He lived for a few years in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and he studied there in French language schools as a child. Reportedly, he was a bit of a class clown. He often spent most of his time drawing and being disruptive. In 1943, Goscinny's father passed away, and he would go to work as an assistant accountant, though he would be laid off only 2 years later in 1945. He then became an illustrator for an advertising firm, and in 1945, his family moved to the United States. Goscinny would actually leave the United States in 1946 because he didn't want to get drafted into the U.S. Army, so he went to France in 1946, enlisted in the French army, and served in the 141st Alpine Infantry Battalion, where he would draw posters for the army. In 1948, Goscinny would return to New York and started work at a small studio where he got to know Will Elder, Jack Davis, and Harvey Kurtzman, all of whom would later go on to contribute and be early founders of Mad magazine. In 1951, he would travel to Paris to take on a job as the head of the World Press Agency's French office, where he would meet Albert Uderzo. Uderzo was born in 1927 in Fismes, France, as Alberto Aliando Uderzo to Italian immigrants. And a fun fact, he was born with 6 fingers on each hand, though they would be the extra fingers would be removed early in his childhood, as doctors were concerned that he would hurt himself because they were non-moving fingers, so he would pull at them a lot as an infant, and they were worried he was going to break his non-functional fingers, so they removed them.
Well, that's good. And it also probably made sure that he didn't have 6 fingers in school.
Yeah.
Growing up in France as the son of Italian immigrants often led Uderzo and his family being subject to xenophobia, largely because the area they lived at the time was reportedly incredibly left-wing and harbored some deep-rooted anti-Italian sentiment due to Mussolini's growing strength in Italy. One story has that a victim of an Italian-German bombing during the Spanish Civil War actually spat in Uderzo's face because he was Italian. Uderzo got into drawing during his childhood, having been inspired by cartoons of Walt Disney like Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck. At the age of 12, his parents learned that he was colorblind, and he would have to label all of his colors, though primarily drew in black and white. After Uderzo met Goscinny in 1951, the two got to working together, putting their first storyline, Papa. The story follows a Native American named Papa and his friend Herbert Brussels Sprout, a French officer, which is a great name for a French officer, especially coming from an Italian who was picked on by the French. The comic, while definitely dated and problematic in comparison to today's Sanders, did set up some familiar tropes in their work. specifically the use of puns and references in characters' names. In 1961, the two would release their first book, Asterix the Gaul, which sold around 6,000 copies in its first year. Success soon followed. Their next book, Asterix and the Golden Sickle, which I'm pretty sure I've read, sold 20,000 copies. Asterix and the Goths would sell 40,000 copies. Asterix the Gladiator would sell 150,000 copies. And the numbers continued to rise as they released more comics. So, when their ninth book was released, Asterix and the Normans, it was released in 1967, they sold 1.2 million copies in 2 days. Goscinny would end up passing away in 1977, and Uderzo would take on the role of writer and illustrator for Asterix and Obelix until 2005 with the release of Asterix and the Falling Sky. He would officially retire from writing and illustrating in 2011, and sadly passed away in 2020 at the age of 92, which is a pretty complete life, especially for a dude.
And he only retired in 2011, so
yeah,
he was in his 80s when he retired, so he was working for most of his life.
Yeah, which if you find something you love to do, he's had more Asterix stories to tell, and then in 2011 he didn't have any more.
Yeah, he was done.
In the years since, the Asterix books have seen new writers. From 2013 until 2021, the books were written by Jean-Yves Fieri and illustrated by Didier Conrad. Fieri would step down as writer, and Fab Caro would take on the role of writer for the series in 2023. The most recent book to be published is Asterix and the White Iris in 2023, and to date, there has been 38 books in the main series, with 5 additional books being released. And how long are these books?
They range. They're not that long. So they typically are about 40, 44 pages. Some are slightly shorter, some are slightly longer, but they always range in about the 40 pages mark. And they're big. For those who aren't familiar with Euro comics, I want to say, because I think when us in America think of comic books, we think of the standard comic size, which is like the Golden Age, then Silver Age style of comics, which are kind of a distinct size. They're not like paper size, they're a little bit thinner. Euro comics were primarily published as magazine sized books,
right?
So they're larger in size. Tintin was published in the kind of similar magazine style book size. That's just kind of the standard.
Same with Black Sad and 13 as well. They're just odd shaped, which it kind of annoys me that they're in Euro size because they don't fit well on a bookshelf with American sized books. Because our books are, especially our comic books, tend to be a smaller format than their comic books. So they're if I have a row of trades, they tend to all be in the same perfect line, and then they have these couple that jut out weirdly because they are European.
For those unfamiliar with the story of Asterix, each book summarizes the story on the first page. It reads as follows. The year is 50 BC. Gaul is entirely occupied by the Romans. Well, not entirely. One small village of indomitable Gauls still holds out against the invaders. And life is not easy for the Roman legionnaires who garrison the fortified camps of Totorum, Aquarium, Laudanum, and Compendium. ... And then it goes into the actual story. But that's all you need to really know about these characters. It takes place in a small Gaulish village located in the north of what is now present-day France, at the time known as Armorica, and the Gauls in this village have managed to hold back the Roman conquest due to a secret they have: a druid who can brew a magic potion that gives them unstoppable force and near invulnerability. The potion only lasts about 10 minutes, and the Gauls, though, have another secret weapon: Obelix. Obelix is a large Gaul who fell into the potion as a baby and has been given permanent strength. His best friend Asterix, while not permanently able to punch people as best as Obelix can, is shrewd and cunning, and often can just simply outsmart the Romans without even having to take a sip of the magic potion. So you have an incredibly smart person, which is Asterix, and essentially an unstoppable, immovable force, which is Obelix, and that prevents the Romans from getting anywhere near the small little Gaulish village of about 60 people. So it is not like they are a massive community. They are a tiny, tiny village. Despite the historical plot setting, Asterix is a comedy. It takes lots of influence from slapstick and other types of comedy like that, and it has a heavy use of puns. Character names are often humorous references to their profession, but made to sound either Gaulish or Roman by adding ix or us to the end of it. So for example, the fishmonger in the Gaulish village is unhygienics. The bard is cacophonics. The druid is getafix. The oldest member of the village is geriatrics. The smith is fully automatics. And some of the Romans they encounter include Gluteus Maximus, Detritus, Christmas Bonus, and so on and so on. Also, occasionally historical figures appear. The most prevalent is Julius Caesar himself, but also Cleopatra, Brutus, Pompey, and Caesarion all appear in different reoccurring roles. There are also frequent references to Vercingetorix, who was an actual Gallic chieftain who famously surrendered to Caesar before his execution in 46 BC, and there are nods to various gods like the Gallic god Tutatis and Roman god Jupiter. There are also references to other comics, with two characters resembling Thompson and Thompson, drawn in the style of Verger, appearing in Asterix in Belgium. There are also pirates, who are a reoccurring group that are direct references to the Belgian comic series Redbeard. So each of the pirates that you see in Asterix are analogous to a Redbeard character. Some characters are also direct references to famous individuals, such as caricatures of Charlton Heston in character as Ben-Hur in Asterix and the Golden Sickle, French politician Jacques Chirac, who appeared as an economist who buys one of Obelix's menhirs in Obelix and Company, the Beatles show up in Asterix in Britain, and Julian Assange appears as a character by the name of Confound Their Politics, who is a spy who publishes Caesar's secrets in the book Asterix and the Missing Scroll. So they are usually pretty timely with their references. Now, before we jump into the games of the Asterix line, I do want to make a kind of disclaimer on the Asterix comics as a whole, a similar disclaimer that we featured in the Tintin comics. Like Tintin, there is some racist humor and stereotypes that are found in the Asterix books. The writing tends to satire all different cultures around Europe. The British, the Greeks, the Germans, and the Belgians, they all get their fair share of ribbing. In fact, Uderzo and Goscinny famously apologized for Asterix and the Goths because they thought it was really mean to the Germans. They were like, wow, that book was really Germanophobic. We should probably apologize for this. But most notably, I think, is their stylization of people of color, specifically black characters. Some of the early drawings of black characters have almost minstrel-like lips, often portrayed with wearing animal skins or having bones in their hair. It's just not really politically correct or appropriate, I think, for modern standards. They do kind of correct this in later publications, but it's just something to go into knowing.
To get back to the point of the podcast, the comics were a smash hit, each one selling more and more. It would inspire 10 animated movies, 5 live-action films, an upcoming Netflix miniseries, and an entire theme park north of Paris called Parc Asterix, and of course, video games. Lots and lots of video games, which is what we're here to talk about. In terms of video games, Asterix has had a pretty in-depth history with them. There are also tons of Asterix games with titles being released as recent as 2023. We won't cover all of them because it's not what we do. We like to make sure that there's material for future episodes.
We have to solidify our legacy.
That's right. In case we have to do an episode in 2027 or 2028, we'll have Asterix episodes that we can do. The earliest of the Asterix games were released on the Atari 2600. Both released in 1983, Asterix and Obelix are two individual Atari games that, as you expect, are fairly simple because they are Atari games. One called Asterix and another one called Obelix. I'm guaranteeing that the Asterix Atari game sold better than the Obelix one.
Most likely not, because we'll get into what they're currently valued at, but the Asterix game is much more sought after in terms of because it was re-released under a different name.
Oh, so the Asterix was also re-released as Taz, and the game features you controlling Asterix's head as you move up and down various levels on the screen. You collect items that kind of look like bags. You also have to avoid items that kind of look like harps. I'm not really sure what they represent. In the Taz version of the game, it's Taz from Tasmanian Devil. So there are dynamite and burgers. And it's pretty simple as you can expect, but enjoyable as the game and has a very arcadey-like quality to it, which is great that they made a game around one character and said, the Americans aren't going to get this. Let's make it about a character that they will get.
What's funny is it wasn't released in Europe and then brought over to America as Taz. It came out in America as Asterix, and then they realized, oh wait, maybe we should release it as a different name.
But there was also Obelix, which was released on the 2600 at the same time, and at least in the same year. and it plays a little bit differently than Asterix. You actually control Asterix, who walks around on the bottom of the screen, and Obelix is at the top of the screen, and he's carrying a menhir, which is a large rock that he chisels in the books. And by large, I mean like double the size of a human large. And he throws the menhir down, and your job is to line up the Romans by stunning them and get them to be hit by the menhir as it comes down.
Both games were released in the US and can fetch a hefty price. If you can stumble across a loose copy of Asterix, it goes for about $125. A boxed copy ranges upward to $450. Obelix, meanwhile, a little cheaper. You can find a loose copy probably for around $50, though boxed copies also go for about $430 to $450. The Taz version of Asterix, though, thank goodness. If you want to find this game, you're in luck, because it goes for about $5 to $10 loose, and it's very common. $50 though for a boxed copy. I will say Atari games tend to just be more expensive in box because they came in cardboard boxes. Also they came out in the 80s, and people weren't saving boxes back then because there wasn't really game collecting back then. So the cartridges are plentiful, but the boxes are few. Now, the next Asterix game that would also get released in the United States was Asterix and the Magic Cauldron for the C64. Though it was released under a different name in the United States, it was released as Ardoc the Barbarian because they lost the Asterix license. It's still basically the exact same game. There are some slight changes to the sprites, but the influence is still incredibly obvious. The main character's village is literally taken out of the pages of Asterix, complete with Cacophonix's treehouse still being prominently in the background. So if I didn't see that Ardoc the Barbarian had a title screen, Ardoc the Barbarian, and I looked at a screenshot, I would say this is an Asterix game, just from the art style. Like, I could tell immediately that it's an Asterix game. However, they just changed the title screen and slightly tweaked the graphics. In the game, Asterix and in Ardoc, you wander around the area and occasionally run into Romans, who are just called soldiers in Ardoc, and you beat them up. You can travel around different interconnected areas. You start in the Gaulish village, you then travel to the forest, and then to the Roman camps. You also will occasionally encounter wild boars, which can be defeated for health.
One of the more prominent releases in the US, and by prominent we mean we owned it, was Asterix and the Great Rescue for the Sega Genesis. Developed by Core Design and published by Sega for the Genesis, Master System, and Game Gear, the game sees you playing as either Asterix or Obelix, and you are tasked with saving Getafix and Obelix's dog, Dogmatics, who have both been captured by the Romans. The game is a platformer where you travel various regions of the Roman Empire before finally arriving in Rome itself. It's a tough game. When characters get hit, the invincibility buffer won't last long enough to escape from an enemy, and you can sponge damage pretty quickly. The platforming can be a bit imprecise, and also the hitboxes of the enemies often require you to get a little too close for comfort and also be forced to take a hit while doing so. That being said, it's still pretty fun, and the music's incredibly catchy. When it was released, it received mixed reviews. Sega Power gave it a 78%, GamePro gave it a 14.5 out of 20, and Electronic Gaming Monthly gave it a 26 out of 50. In GamePro's review, they found that the game was pretty difficult, and they criticized the controls, but they still felt the game would be appealing to people who liked more difficult puzzles in their games. The last of the Asterix games to get released in North America, at least until a bunch got remastered and put out on PC, was Asterix and Obelix XXL for the PS2, which released in 2004. In North America, it was titled Asterix and Obelix Kick Buttocks.
Yes. In Europe, Asterix and Obelix XXL released for GameCube and PS2, while in North American markets it was only PS2. And it's an action-adventure game where you must rescue villagers from the Romans. You switch between Asterix or Obelix during a particular mission, depending on what the gameplay actually entails, and it's an automatic switch. Asterix is faster, but requires a magic potion to break larger items. Obelix is slower, but can smash crates without the potion. Defeating Romans gives you helmets, and you use these helmets to purchase items like health or attacks. And that's a thing with the books too. Like, they collect the helmets of the Romans they defeat on the battlefield, and they just like store them, and there's usually jokes with them. Like, I think there's one, I know there's a scene in the movie, but I think there's a scene also in the book where a tax collector comes and he's like, I need the taxes for Rome, and they just like bring out all of the helmets they've been carrying, and they're like, here you go, for like, here's for Caesar's army, here's the helmets we stole. Asterix and Obelix Kick Buttocks, or XXL, received mixed reviews. GameSpot gave it 5.4 out of 10. IGN gave it 6.7 out of 10. And it would, though, get remastered and released on Steam and modern consoles under the title Asterix and Obelix XXL Romastered. The sequels to XXL would also get remastered and released outside of Europe, with Asterix and Obelix XXL releasing in 2018 in North America, which originally came out in 2006 just in Europe. And I think it's XXL2 that has like direct references to Sonic and Mario. Like there are Romans you fight that are blue and they carry rings with them and they have red shoes and they run really fast. They're very obviously Sonic references. Now, modern gaming is largely, in my opinion, less region divided. So back in the day, some regions would get some games while others wouldn't. There's still a bit of a case of that. It's more in the case of translations, though, not necessarily like accessibility. Like you can often buy a game from another country and it will still work on your system. There are some still region coding, but I think a large majority of games just get released worldwide at this point. And this is largely thanks to stores like the PSN Store or the Nintendo eShop or Xbox Live or Steam. And because of this, various other Asterix games have seen release on modern consoles, such as a recently released arcade throwback called Slap 'em All and its sequel Slap 'em All 2, or another game which is a deck building action game called Asterix and Obelix Heroes. I think Asterix is, like Tintin, slowly entering the American market, at least through video games. It's becoming more available, at least. Whether or not it will ever be as popular as it was in Europe, I doubt it. Though I think it is interesting that Netflix is at least putting out the Asterix stuff in America. I know that they have previously released Asterix content, but have region locked it to Europe. So it is nice that it's at least going to be available for American audiences. I think one of the problems, though, and I was talking to my partner about this, is that Asterix and Obelix is distinctly very European. It is about people who lived in Europe fighting people who lived in Europe. It is about the Gauls fighting the Romans. It is distinctly European. I think that does make it harder for it to access the American market, though I'm happy that at least some of the games are being remastered and released accessibly for people like me who love the franchise. Anyway, that will do it for our Asterix episode. Well, to get into our retro rewind, Seth had me play Wacky Wheels for MS-DOS. Released in 1994 and developed by Beavis Soft and published by Apogee Software, Wacky Wheels is, for lack of a better way to describe it, a knockoff of Super Mario Kart. Instead of playing as Mario characters, though, you play as various zoo animals, and instead of riding go-karts, you ride what are called lawnmowers. Though they are definitely go-karts, they are not lawnmowers. The game just calls them lawnmowers. The game is shockingly close to the original Super Mario Kart in terms of both its aesthetic and gameplay. Shockingly, to the point where I actually checked to see if Nintendo sued Beavis Soft and Apogee, but they didn't. So maybe it was close enough, but not close enough for Nintendo to care. It's fun, though. I don't want to knock it for being literally just Super Mario Kart without Mario in it. It is a fun game. I still really liked it. I did really enjoy playing it, and I think it definitely holds up. Next week, Seth, you can play Tecmo NBA Basketball for the NES.
Thanks. Zach had me play Ogre Battle, The March of the Black Queen for the SNES. Released in 1993, this is a real-time tactical role-playing game that was developed and published by Quest Corporation. It's the very first Ogre Battle. They will go on to have a number of different Ogre Battles, and I think we have an episode where we talk about Ogre Battles, or at least mention them.
Probably mention them. I don't think we did a full episode on Ogre Battle.
Ooh, maybe we'll do a full episode on Ogre Battles. However, Ogre Battle, The March of the Black Queen covers the revolt against an evil empress, and the game starts with you going through and answering questions conducted by a wizardry man about your personal leadership styles, and eventually it draws a tarot card which determines your abilities and starting units. Now, there's a real-time tactics area where you control an army and on an overland map, and then a zoomed-in combat kind of fight, similar to very role-playing games of its era, except the game doesn't really allow you to choose the actions that your character is doing, and it does tell you how you'll pick do the best attack or a strong attack or a leader attack, but you won't be you suplex on this other person to suplex them. So the game is kind of like a still like an army simulator tactical game versus like, say, Shining Force, where it was like a character simulator and you just had a bunch of characters. So that's going to be your difference there. It's a game that, based on the gameplay, may turn some people off, but I think that if you approach it as kind of a unique tactical role-playing game, I think that you may find enjoyment of it if you like an older 16-bit type of game. Anyway, next week, Zach, you could play Super Tennis for the SNES.
Great. I will. Well, that will do it for our episode. I want to thank everyone for listening. And if anyone has any memories of Asterix, either as a comic or the movies or the games, let us know. You can do so by emailing classicgamingbrothers@gmail.com. We're available wherever podcasts can be found, be it Podbean, iTunes, or iHeartRadio. You can find us on social media. Look us up, Classic Gaming Brothers or CG Brothers Pod. And of course, visit classicgamingbrothers.com. That being said, Seth, am I forgetting anything?
Don't play games like my brother.
And don't play games like my brother.
I've been Seth.
And I've been Zach.
And we've been the Classic Gaming Brothers.
That's right.
That's right.